Welcome to the Monday Minute of the Hunt Backcountry podcast. These are shorter and more informal episodes where we answer your listener questions. Steve, Giardia recovery is in full swing for you.
Yeah, had a mystery illness while you were out here elk hunting last week, and it was I don't know if it was Giardia or what, but it was some rough going, especially the fact that we were backpacking. It was it was not a fun experience for me.
Yeah, I say that in jest. I don't think it was Giardia, but you were like tracing timelines because usually I think 1 to 3 weeks is what they say about it hitting. You're like, well, I was
Well,
in the
yeah, I mean,
field.
when we were out there, I was like, dude, my lower stomach is messed up. Obviously evidenced by going to the bathroom every 10 minutes. And I was like, I don't, this is, can you get Giardia? Can you get it that fast? It was like, cause it was like day two of the hunt that it showed up and then got home. And once we researched it, sounds like that's like a 1 to 3 week time. And I was like, well, I guess it's possible from, when maybe it happened on the previous hunt. I don't know. Or just some mystery little, like type flu-like type bug that only upset my stomach. But it was, no bueno.
Well, I'm knocking on wood. There's no like lagging contagion that's going to hit me anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't wish this one on anyone. But much yesterday kind of turned the corner, and today much better.
Good deal. Yeah, we were out chasing elk last week. Actually, the last Monday minute, we kind of announced like, "Hey, we
Yeah.
pre-recorded this because we're headed into the field." So back now, back a little bit earlier than anticipated, in part because that bug. We are going to get out and hunt for you over the weekend and the first part of this week, and realize like, there's no way you're getting out. Part of the thing was,
No,
yeah,
no.
you're bugged, but also. I mean, I just noticed, even though you weren't saying much over time, like you were eating less and less because everything just
Yeah,
messed you up.
yeah. I could not eat. Basically, like the dried mangoes is like the only thing I know I could eat that didn't like immediately upset my stomach.
Well, we said on that last Monday minute, kind of our strategy was to get in there, cover a bunch of ground, stay really mobile, and see what happens. And that's definitely what we did. It got off to a pretty quick start with, yeah, flew over Monday, stopped at pit stop at your house to get gear organized, head straight to the mountains, and really hiked in right up until dark. And then first thing Tuesday, we were into elk. It didn't take long. It was great.
I mean, the plan that we had definitely worked because there was hunting pressure down lower and all the drainages, but it be able to like get up into the back of them and just be living back there where we were hearing bugles all night. We knew where to be in the morning. Um, but yeah, it was definitely the strategy worked. We just didn't come on with a dead elk.
Yeah, we won't do a full play by play. This is going to be a Monday minute. We had several listener questions that kind of tie in, even to some of the things that we experienced this week. But I just like overall would say it was a great week. It was bow hunting elk. It was what I was excited to experience. Was on that first full day, like we said, we're into elk that morning. That opportunity didn't come together. If it was a rifle, definitely would have been a dead bull. And then by that afternoon, we chased some other bugles and kept going. I was at full draw on the same or on a different bull, but I was at full draw twice on one bull under 20 yards, just no clear shot. Just in the herd bulls, cows, satellites. It was good, heavy elk action. I think Steve, the whole week that we were out there, I don't know if we went more than maybe 3 hours without hearing a bugle, if that.
Yeah, if that. It was good. I mean, especially considering the full moon. It was really bright nights and but the elk were just active and running around and it was great. Best part was no wolf sign. That's an area that I historically hunted and left because the wolves got really heavy in there and did not see any fresh wolf tracks or anything like that which was great. I'm sure there's a pack running around. They just hadn't been in the area in a while. I mean, when you're hunting elk and and there's wolves around, you know it. Like the elk are very quiet. They don't talk at all during the day, at least in my experience. And these elk were not that at all.
Yeah, we played, I mean, did what we could, obviously made and what you can call mistakes in hindsight. And part of that is just judging bulls. There was opportunities we were not aggressive enough, and there was opportunities. I don't want to say we were too aggressive, but there was bowls that went the other way from our calls, and there was bowls we should have, charged in sooner. There was times we were uh, persistently patient, and it paid off. It's typical elk hunting and learning those lessons and trying to get into bow range and looking back with hindsight and going shoulda, woulda, coulda, and if type situations. Everything really came to Thursday to cut ahead to like towards the end of the week. We were able to call in a bull that you kind of dropped back as a caller. I pushed ahead as the shooter, which we had done multiple times that week. I was, trying to get set up where there was some good shooting lanes. I knew the direction this bull was coming from, and I thought I knew where he was kind of like enter into my sight, which he did enter to my sight that spot. He was coming towards me, kind of frontal. He split off to the left, and I was hoping he was going to split off to his right, but he split off to his left, and the wind was kind of quartering to that direction. So this is like just after midday, a little uphill thermal, and then a slight breeze that was pushing to the direction he ended up heading. When he went to go that direction, he stepped behind something. I came to full draw. He was behind brush, brush, brush. I was waiting, thinking, man, maybe he's not going to wind. Maybe he's going to keep coming. He was headed right towards your calls and was a few steps from a shooting lane that I had. But before he got to that point, he definitely picked up some wind. I didn't see his exact response because it was so thick that even though he was 30-ish yards away, I didn't get a full sense of his reaction when I'm assuming caught wind because again, it was quartering that direction. But I kind of heard him turn. He didn't full on like bust and sprint, but he kind of like whipped around, slight trot, headed back the way he came from. And when he did that, I was able to cow call and get him to stop in a shooting lane that I had that was right about 40. And I was called, got him to stop at full draw, release an arrow. And the way that the shot was, he was uphill from me. Between him and I, there was like a small, I don't know, 3.5, 4 foot little pine tree. And the top of that pine tree was kind of covering his heart and lower half of the vitals. But I knew my arrow and the arc of the arrow was going to clear that. So I held, felt like I executed a good shot, saw my arrow take off, crest that pine tree, no problem. And then when it got past that pine tree, I kind of lost sight of my arrow, but heard a good thoop, hit him. He goes to take off. And as he takes off, I also see, I just caught a glimpse of fletching. And I'm like, man, I think my arrow came out of him at that point. And yeah, so then you hear that, you hear the shot, you hear the impact. You obviously heard me call and stop him. And so you come up and he takes off. We're obviously replaying things and going over what happened because it wasn't inside of you and checking yardages and things of that nature. And I don't know, Steve, long story short, we had his tracks for the first little bit. We had his tracks before we had any blood. After waiting a while and then covering a little bit of ground on his tracks, we picked up a little bit of blood. And basically, over the course of the next 24-ish hours, um, only had slight little bit of blood and unfortunately never recovered the bull, which, dude,
Yeah,
first for
it's
me. Um, and it sucks. Yeah. I mean, even like every night since then, like that night of the shot, which was Thursday, we spent hours and miles till we lost light. We get back in there Friday, spend hours and miles. And then, dude, literally every night since then, when I lay in bed, I'm just like, replaying
replaying that.
everything, and oh, it sucks.
Yeah, it's a definitely a terrible feeling, and then just not knowing what the heck happened, and it's it's frustrating how easy they can be to kill sometimes, and then other times you're just like, I have no idea what happened. And it's
Yeah.
not like we have video evidence or just like the camera was run or anything like that. You can go back and replay it. It's all a giant unknown. I mean,
Hmm.
the only thing that we can conclude is you hit pretty high, like just below the spine, but above anything vital, and it explains the lack of penetration because you only got like what 10, 11 inches maybe where that arrow snapped off.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating, super frustrating. And we had a pretty good, at least what I feel is good is, I mean, the area he should have gone into and laid down and died was, we covered it extremely well. We basically ran grids and followed tracks with both of us running Onyx the whole time and just checking, making sure we covered everything. And it was kind of an old logging road below us and then a really rocky ridge above. And we walked both of those perimeters and never saw any blood coming out of it. So it's like, all right, if he was bleeding and he died, he's down in this area, which was, I'll say, 400 or 500 yards by 3/4 of a mile. And we pretty much gridded that entire area, and it's just never saw another drop of blood. And
Yeah.
then obviously that when you shot, he basically went uphill for
Gosh,
quite a
hundreds of
ways,
yards.
which was, I was like, I don't know how many times I've seen a bull be shot like fatally and travel uphill for a long distance. Maybe a short 20, 30 yards, but then they're going to start side hilling and going downhill. And the little bit of blood we did get going vertical was going pretty quartered heavily uphill. So
Yeah.
it's frustrating. Yeah, I think you did. I think every hunter should do this. It's a lot don't, but you were like, well, find this bull or not. My tag's notched
Yeah.
because we don't know if that bull's alive or dead. We have no clue. All signs are, it certainly was alive enough to travel outside of an area that was like something we could reasonably search. And yeah, I think it's the right thing just to say, you know what, we were, Thursday after you shot, whether we found him or not, you're like, my tag's notched, I'm done. And you certainly had the temptation too, because Friday afternoon bulls were screaming all around us, and you're just, it's no, we're looking for the animal we shot, and yeah, there was we were surrounded by elk
Yeah.
as we were searching, so. Yeah, it's frustrating. And then dealing with all that as we're going through all that, I'm dealing with my whatever the heck I had going on, stomach issues, and yeah. So we came home Friday night. And,
You
yeah,
were you were truly, truly sick to your stomach, and I was also sick to my stomach in a different way.
yeah, yeah. It sucks, man. It sucks. That losing an animal's never fun. And then you and I had some discussions on like as we were hiking around, I was like, I think this is like a crazy statement, but like I don't think bow hunting is actually ethical in the sense that like what do you define as you're going to release that arrow and the percentage of time that the animal is guaranteed to die, right? Or that will die quickly and cleanly. Because if anyone says it's 100%, they're just flat out lying. Eventually, if you bow hunt long enough, this situation's going to happen. So, at what percentage I mean, is acceptable, is considered ethical, an ethical standard. And as we talked about with all the mechanical versus fixed blade broadhead debate earlier this year, the episode we did with Jeremy Duggar, obviously even people reporting their wound rates, I mean, they are incredibly high. And I don't know, it's tricky. I think all you can do is just, I mean, there's a lot of things out of your control. You just got to practice as much as you can. Make sure your shooting is competent. Make sure your setup is dialed in, and then really, obviously, all that hinges on just taking ethical shots out there. But you absolutely did. You stopped him. It's a 40-yard shot. You should be able to make that all day, every day. You didn't. replaying it in my mind, I heard you cow call. You had a reed in your mouth, and then it wasn't like cow call shoot. It was cow call, and I was like, "Whoa, Mark!" Because I couldn't see what's going on. And I was like, "Oh, he just stopped a bull." I could just, you knew you. The only reason you would cow call would be to stop the animal in a shooting window, and it was a good like 2, 3 seconds. It wasn't this like the elk's running out of there and you shot real quick. You definitely like stopped him, gathered your composure, made a good shot, and then from there it's just up in the air, I guess. It's
Yeah.
frustrating.
That's part of what I'm not at all trying to like take any blame away from me. I also can't put blame on anything in particular, which is part of why it's really frustrating.
Yeah,
Like not that I want to be like, oh yeah, I made a terrible shot, or I rushed it, or I jerked it, or I didn't even aim, or I wasn't in my peak. Like there's nothing that I can point to. Which again, I'm not saying I the outcome is ultimately my responsibility. I'm not trying to shy away from that, but I also because the yardage was good, within a couple yards, because I took my time, because I aimed, because I pulled through a shot. And then, yeah, I just don't know. And that's
yeah,
part of part of, one of many things that's part of what really, really sucks.
yeah. And it's one of those. I was just talking about this with Jake back the other day. Then we talked about like with Nate Simmons videoing all these hunts and animals stuck in the string. That's something that came into my mind is like, man, you might have done everything perfect, and that elk just dropped 5, 6 inches in the time that you shot. And like I was talking to Jake about this the other day back in the day, so probably 2010, 11, when we were filming for our Pure Elevation Productions, we did. My buddy Jason shot a bull. I think it was a 50-yard shot, but it was a film we put in the full draw film tour, if I remember right. But you literally see, I actually edited that video and I drew like a green line, like perfect kind of lower, that third, third up from the bottom, basically heart,
Hmm.
like long, perfect shot. And then I drew a red line at the top of his back. And you see the arrow flying, tracking, 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 tracking. And then the arrow literally passes through the green line, but that's above the back of the elk.
Dang.
And it's just like, so at 50 yards, it was a same situation. It was a semi alert elk, and that we had cow called to stop it. So it's like, it's alert and looking for something.
Hmm.
But that elk dropped, I don't know what is that, 14 inches, 15, 16 inches in the time that arrow got there. So you could have done everything perfect. And then that happened. And it's just, but how do you adjust for that? Right. Like that, the one thing I do is I do set up all of my, once I, especially like from 40 out to longer ranges, I just set up my hunting setup to be a little bit low
Hmm.
just for like it's really hard to miss low and not kill an animal. You can, but I would say the bulk of the time you miss, and it's not because you missed, it's because the animal ducked and you hit high or you go over its back.
Yeah.
So I just kind of err on, say at 50 yards, if I'm shooting a 3 inch dot, I want my group to be at the bottom center of that dot,
Hmm.
and not in the middle or middle consistently high. I want it just a little bit low, just to give me a little bit of cheat factor. And then you'll hear some guys that are specifically aim like low front shoulder because they know an animal's going to duck and kind of lunge forward at the
Right.
sound of a shot, depending on the type of animal that they're hunting. And that's getting into. I mean, that's kind of, I would say that's pretty advanced. It's pretty hard to do, right? Like aim
Hmm.
for an area that's not actually what you want to hit. But yeah,
Yeah.
sucks, but we also had a ton of fun. It was so
Dude.
fun to be in the elk woods. That last night we were camped. We had a bunch of thunderstorms and rain. That was one of the first times I can remember we actually packed rain jackets because it rained on us a lot. But we were coming into this big basin and from a little and then a smaller little basin that run into it, and we're at the intersection of that all the way up in the back of this area and sitting on this giant slab of granite, and it was raining, and there happened to be a big giant rock which was like almost like a cave we just sat under, and then we camped right there that night, and bulls were just bugling all around us, and stars were out later. It was freaking so rad to be out there.
Yeah. It was from a pure, I don't know, like it was everything I love. The elk
Yeah.
hunting was great. Bulls were vocal. We backpacked. I mean, we had weather to deal with. We put on a ton of miles. Yeah, it was a phenomenal week, other than the ultimate outcome, which is something
Yeah.
that, I keep having to remind myself of, right? It's like there was so much good, just with a not good ending. But if I think about the week, I would just say that this week put the FU in fun of bow hunting. That's my summary. All right, let's dive into some questions that are somewhat related to all this. First one was from Tommy. He said, I heard you guys talk about your archery elk hunting and putting on the miles. When you guys do these hike a bunch archery elk hunts, how are you carrying your bow? Is it strapped to the back of your pack, or is it always in your hand in case something jumps out? Or is it a bit of both? He says, if in hand, is there anything you do to keep from getting fatigued from lugging around a bow for hours, other than not being, never mind, that part of the sentence doesn't make sense. He says, for context, I'm a black-tailed deer hunter, and I'm realizing that bucks will often hide and let you walk by unless you stop and look in their general direction, and that's when they get nervous and jump out. He said, if I'm not ready with an arrow knocked, I'm not getting a shot. Yeah, there's a lot in there. At the end, I would just say he goes from talking about carrying a bow in general to then saying, if I'm not ready with an arrow knocked, I'm not getting a shot. Like those are two totally different things. Just carrying a bow in general, but then doing really any sort of travel movement with an arrow knocked is something man, I try to avoid. I'm super
Yeah.
cautious about moving with an arrow knocked. There's certainly times this week where I did it, um, but it's few and far between and very intentional and cautious and slow. Especially some of the country we were in, it was, between rugged stuff, loose rocks, wet vegetation. I mean, it just doesn't take much to slip, and I don't want an arrow or broadhead exposed at that point. So I would just say be incredibly cautious about moving with an arrow knocked, period. In terms of carrying my bow, I mean, Steve, we hunted 5 days and I don't know how many miles. I know even in the first 24 hours, we did like 20 plus miles. I never once had the bow strapped to my pack. So it's just always in hand for me. When I'm hunting, there's times where I'll bow hunt and have it strapped to my pack. If I'm just obviously hiking in the dark, if I'm hiking in before season starts, if I'm hiking in where I just fully anticipate, hey, we have to get X miles into this country before I'm remotely thinking about hunting. But I would just say, at least this week where we were, Steve, I mean, as soon as we left the rig, it's like, man, there could be elk here.
Hmm.
And so every step we covered, my bow was in my hand. Um, because there was at least some potential that something could develop relatively quickly.
Yeah, we didn't, the area we were hunting, there was zero trails, right? So it's just park the truck and 400 yards from the truck. I mean, you're already like, we could be into elk. Something could happen here. And I think I made this rant on a Monday Minute not too far back. Like people are so concerned about carrying their weapon, whether it's a rifle or a bow, and carrying it in their hand. And I think it's like something you just got to suck up and do. Like it certainly is annoying. There's times when like if I'm carrying the bow in my left hand forever, like my arm starts to kind of go numb and get tingly. So I got to switch it to my other hand and kind of go back and forth. Sometimes I'll like hold on to the stabilizer and throw it over my shoulder and carry it that way. But it's always like, with me, and like I have very, very, very quick access to it, right? It's basically in my hand the entire time. Unless hiking in on trail. The one night we hiked out in the dark, you could have stopped and thrown it on your pack because we had a couple miles to go where it got dark and you probably wouldn't have been shooting, obviously. Um, but it is what it is. I remember at some point you're like, yeah, we were running some prototype stuff, and you're like, my shoulder's a little sore, but I think it's just because I've just carried my bow 20 something miles, um, and
Not because of the
not something
back.
anything to do with the not something to do with the backpack, and it's like, yeah, but that's just like that's what you have to do. Because I saw some accessory, somebody's invented some bow carrier, and it was on an Instagram ad or something. It was just it's this giant piece of plastic with multiple straps, and it's strapped over the top of your backpack. And I'm like, that's it's just like so elaborate and complex. Um, and then like completely, like if you wanted to access anything in the backpack, you'd have to take the whole thing off, at least unstrap half of it to open it up. And it was like, it just said that was my rant. It was like people are like so concerned about carrying their weapon that they go through great lengths not to, and they just create more complexity and more issues. So at the end of the day, just after by the end of the week, you were getting pretty used to carrying your bow, and it wasn't a big deal.
To a certain point, you just stop thinking about
Yeah,
it. You just, it's like, okay, it's
yeah,
day
it
three
is what
of
it
me
is.
doing this nonstop. Like I'm not, the other reason
Yeah,
I
yeah,
tend to like it, and this again goes back to like terrain that you're in, but if you're slipping and falling, I like my bow in my hand more than on my pack just because I can maneuver with it better and I feel like it's
yeah,
better protected. So anytime, we did a lot of side hilling, we did a lot of, again, kind of some loose stuff. So my bow is always going to be opposite the mountain. So if we're side hilling and it's uphill to the right, if I'm slipping and falling, I don't have my bow on the side of the mountain that I would fall into. It's always going to be in that opposite side. And then, just reactionary wise, I'm able to, if I do slip, if I fall, I'm able to react and like kind of lift the bow up even further. Whereas if it's on your pack, you take a slip, you fall, you trip, whatever, um, maybe you're going to be totally fine, but maybe you're going to fall in such a way that you just can't protect the bow as much. I did have locking buckles on the face of our pack. We use those when we secure a bow to the pack. So if there was times, we're packing out an elk, we're hiking in the dark, I wasn't set on never strapping the bow to the pack. It's just the way that this hunt went. I never did. So I was ready to do it. The pack can do it easily. I just, yeah, didn't have that
yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah, I would say like at the end of the day, suck it up. If you're in elk, if you're in the blacktail woods, and there's a chance that any moment an animal can pop out and you can shoot it, you need to have your weapon like in your hand, ready to go. And then all the areas, the times in the dark, where you're like clearly not going to get a shot, then yeah, strap it to the pack, hike in, make your life a little bit easier.
Quickly, Tommy also asked in the second part of his email, he said, also, when you're archery hunting in black bear country, not grizzly bear country, are you carrying a sidearm for protection? I ask because I spooked a black bear at about 15 yards on opening day of deer season. And when telling this story to some folks, most people asked if I had a pistol. I didn't, but should I? I won't tell you what you should do, Tommy, but yeah, in general, I don't carry a sidearm in black bear country. Yeah, but that's, personal decision. If anything, I've had people, because we've addressed this before. I mean, we've had listeners say they carry all the time and it has less to do with black bears and more just people, even in the backcountry. So there's so many different thoughts and everything else on that. I would just say for us and our style of hunting, same thing with like food. We get the question all the time. Are you guys hanging food? Are you doing something in black bear country, not grizzly bear country? No, but we're generally just picking up camp, moving, like very mobile. And so whether it's sidearm or food precaution, not generally doing anything for black bears in particular.
Yeah, I only time I'm packing sidearms Alaska. Any, I don't. That being said, I'm not hunting Wyoming, Montana that has heavy and very aggressive grizzly bear populations. If I was over there, I would absolutely be packing a sidearm.
You'd have
But
like a
generally,
RPG or something.
yeah. But anything in Idaho where I hunt, there are no grizzly bears, or if there's a story of one from somebody saw one 10 years ago, sure, but I've never seen one. And yeah, so I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about black bears or wolves or mountain lions and any. I mean, I guess I'm just like a just like look at the facts. Like you probably have a better chance of winning the lottery than you do of getting attacked and killed by one of those three animals, right? That's going to happen exceptionally rare. So I don't worry about it.
I don't feel like I should have to beat this drum, but we've gotten the emails of people saying, you guys are influencers and people listen to what you say and do what you say. We're not telling anybody what to do. We're just saying what we do. So carry if it makes you feel great. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think there's that aspect of that. Maybe you can relax a little bit, right? Like you're less on
Yeah.
edge. If you're someone out there, you're on edge, like you're worried there's a bear behind every bush that's going to jump out and get you. Yeah, pack a pistol. You'll sleep better at night.
All right. Next email was from Hunter. He said, you guys are currently on your archery elk hunt in Idaho when I'm sending this email. I was just listening to the pre-recorded Monday Minute 281 yesterday, and Steve mentioned your strategy was to stay very mobile and move from basin to basin very quickly. He says, I have a rifle tag for the same area and was planning to use that exact same tactic to cover as much ground as I can until I find elk. He said, I've been following all of Mark, I'm not sure, Livesay? Yeah, I think Livesay is how you say that. Mark Livesay's tips for e-scouting for elk, finding features, and developing a hunt plan to get away from roads and pressure. He says, I have several areas planned out, but I'm afraid of getting married to one area, and I just have a couple of questions. One, how well did the mobile tactic work for you? How much time did you spend in one area before moving on? And two, would your plan change if you were going and doing this hunt mid-October with a rifle in hand? Um, yeah, so Steve, essentially the strategy we used, one, how did it work? Two, how would you adapt it, change it for October with a rifle?
Obviously, we didn't come home with a dead elk, but I think the hunt went as good as it possibly could have. We were into elk, like we said. I mean, at never more than 3 hour gap where we were not into elk. Um, I guess the one condition there, you just got to be in shape to do it. If we definitely like that first day, we legit did it within. We left the truck at 5, and then we got back to the truck the next day right at dark, so like 7:38. So you're talking 27 hours. We did a legit like 21 miles, and not one. I don't exaggerate. Like not one step of that was easy. It was like just it's this old burn, deadfall, rocky, nasty, steep, pretty rugged country back in there. We were never. The interesting thing is we were never more than maybe 5 miles, like direct line from the truck, but just the route that we took. I mean, we're just kind of zigzagging through this country, get to the back of the basin, drop into it, climb out, come down the other side, get into the next basin. So we were just kind of moving through the country quickly and effectively. Uh, Honestly, for me, that first like 21 miles, 27 hours, like I was like almost like, well, I think this was too much. Like it was like I was pretty tired going to bed that night, thinking, oh man. And I woke up the next morning a little sore. Like it was kind of like we bit off a lot for the very first, full day in there.
Balls deep.
But then yeah. Yeah. Yep. But then actually recovered pretty good and continued to hunt hard throughout the rest of the week. But so just know your limitations. Like, are you physically capable to do that? Then great. If you got to move a little bit slower, cover a little less country, maybe you only do 5 miles in a day. I think it's still effective. And we just learned, like, the one thing we didn't do, like I'm thinking, midday, day one there, or day two in there, like we dropped into that one basin and there was no elk sign in there. Like once we kind of got back into the back of it, you and I are like, I mean, there's old sign, but it's like, they're not in here right now. And we got out of there within, an hour. It was like a little 1,500 foot pretty steep climb up over into the next one. And that's what we did. And then we rolled into that next basin, and that's when you had the bull at 20 yards. So we didn't like waste our time back in this area where we were not seeing elk. So the difference with rifle is one, because I have actually in the leftover return tags, so I have a McCall rifle elk tag as well. So I was actually thinking about how I would, if I was, if I kill my moose and have time to go do this hunt, what does that look like? Where would I go? And you just want to, one, most of what we were focusing on from an archery perspective was hunting the timber, like where you got the opportunity to get close. We were kind of avoiding the burns and open areas because it's just like, well, you're gonna have a really tough time calling in an elk to inside of 40 yards in that kind of country. So that strategy just flips. I'm gonna be like camping and sleeping, um, and glassing from glassing points where I can see a lot of country. I would want to get like elevated to where I could hear bugles better and locate and try to pinpoint animals, and really just tailor it to, the using the strengths of the rifle, which is, I can shoot out to 500 yards. But I would very much just like, all right, today I'm going to be in this basin. If I don't hear anything, I don't see anything, bam, I'm gone. Like I'm in the next basin the next day, and just keep moving like that, which can be very effective.
Yeah.
Another strategy is if you're in an area with a lot of hunting pressure, yeah, getting a good glassing point where there's animals and there's also other hunters, and just plop your butt down and sit for 48 hours because eventually someone like other hunters will be pushing animals around and you might get a shot opportunity. That's another way to look at it.
Hmm.
So just you use what strengths you have, maximize them. Like try to reduce like the weaknesses. Like I'm gonna on a rifle hunt again. I'm not gonna be going into thick timber. I'm gonna try to avoid that because that's a handicap with the rifle. I can't see. I can't shoot far. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. You talked about how we dropped into that basin and within an hour kind of made the decision of, let's get out of here. Let's go to the next one. That would be harder to do on the rifle hunt because, again, we dropped into the timber. We dropped into where we are expecting to find elk, see sign, hear bugles, something, and we had none of the above. Whereas, as you said, Steve, you're generally with rifle, you're going to be more perched up high. You're going to be staying out of the timber. You're just ultimately not going to be able to read a basin as well and as quickly to know, is
Yeah.
there elk in here? So instead of dropping in, covering some ground, reading sign, and within an hour or two pulling the plug, that same hunt, maybe Steve, you would have sat on that ridge and covered that basin for a full day and just like, hey, man, something may come out. I may see something. It's gonna be a slower kind of decision-making process because you're just covering that basin differently. So
Mhm.
whereas we were in there an hour, maybe you'd be there a day with a rifle before pulling on. So that's like an example of how that would change, for sure. And maybe you're not going to ultimately make as fast decisions or cover as much ground with the legs because you're being a bit more patient and using the eyes for sure. This one, pretty specific but related. Let's see, this one's from John. He said, I think Mark mentioned he had used and liked the Gossamer Gear The One tent. He said, I used it last week for an elk hunt in Colorado, and I wanted to know how you manage the condensation inside the shelter. He said, I had so much condensation that I could hear droplets of water falling off the ceiling at night. I left one side of the larger vestibule open each night, but that didn't seem to do anything. Do you have any tips? I wanted to address this one in part, yes, about this shelter in particular, but more broadly and say, I mean, it's not just the shelter. I used the Gossamer Gear, the one on our elk hunt this week. I've had it for at least 3 years now, and I've used it all over the place in pretty much all seasons. There's times where condensation can be an issue, and there's times where, like this week, I had zero condensation. Um, it was bone dry on every night I can think of. That night where there was a storm, there was a slight bit of condensation. Certain shelter types are going to be more or less prone to some levels of condensation. But as much as we tend to blame the gear, what I would say is any issue with condensation is going to be really the result of that specific shelter in a specific location or condition. And so it's just not like, hey, you can't just say like, hey, this Gossamer gear, the one sucks because condensation. Um, there, you have to look at site selection, shelter setup, and certain conditions. And so, really, what that boils down to, and there's good articles and videos and discussions. If guys haven't researched really why condensation happens or when it's prone to happen most or how to deal with it best, definitely it's a topic worth looking into and researching on. But just to cover some basics, anytime you're closer to water, anytime you're closer to higher levels of vegetation, anytime you're in more of a low-lying area, and then if you put all those three together, sometimes that's the case,
Hmm.
you're going to be more prone to condensation. So a typical scenario would be, hey, we are going to be kind of down in this draw, and there is a creek, nearby-ish, and or there's some vegetation in this area that could be grass, brush, whatever. That's like the worst scenario to have condensation. If you can take that same context, maybe that same draw, that same drainage, and get a little bit higher, a little bit more away from the water, again, higher, not in the bottom, and then also set up where you're not as much in vegetation, but you're maybe in a little bit more clear ground, that's going to do tremendous things. You could have 200-yard difference in your site selection setup and have a massively different experience with the level of condensation you have. And then in addition to site selection, obviously things like shelter setup, Steve, creating ventilation, whether that's, yes, opening doors, but also how you do things with like space between the ground and your shelter, like the fly. For you, Steve, I know that you used like a single wall tarp shelter. It's something you built on this. And like those are the ones that can be more prone to condensation. Anything that's single wall, like Gossamer Garrett talked about, is kind of a hybrid. There's sections that are single wall, sections that are dual.
Hmm.
But talk a little bit about that aspect of creating ventilation, not in the sense of opening a door in this case, because your shelter's fully enclosed, but with ground contact essentially.
Yeah. So there are, I mean, some shelters, some fabrics are better than others, but at the end of the day, like his your statement of someone saying this shelter sucks because condensation is just like a not a true statement because no matter the second he said water dripping on him all night long, like it's like, okay, it's shelters regardless. He was just camped in a spot that was next to a creek, down in a marshy meadow right off the edge of it. If you think like big picture, if you were to like crest over a ridge in the morning and you're like looking down into this basin, right? Like the the sides of it, the elevation, the peaks, the ridges, they're all going to be pretty dry, and all that moisture is just sitting down in the bottom of that valley. If there's a meadow down there, so that's you could take that down to a micro level of like you were explaining. Like if you're just camped next to the creek and kind of this low brushy spot, you're gonna have a lot more condensation than if there's something over to your right 100 yards, it's 50 feet higher, like a little knob or something like that. And then also getting, especially when I'm in a bivy sack, I always try to get underneath a tree. So any tree with branches and stuff like that, that condensation will settle on the branches and not on top of me. But at the end of the day, condensate, like sometimes it's unavoidable. It is annoying, especially when it's cold in the morning. Everything's wet, and you got to pack it up kind of wet, and then pull it out midday and let things dry out when you get a break if the sun comes out. But certainly, in a condensation just happens from the atmospheric conditions and then your body heat inside the shelter. And so the more ventilation you can get through the shelter, the better. Certain tents have vents built into it. Others have very minimal tents. Hillberg, like with their Four Season one, like really shuts off all the vents because they want to keep moisture out. The fly is really close to the ground. So the shelter that I actually last year was like a side fun project. I built my own kind of custom tarp shelter, and you can adjust just by the height of the trekking poles. You can adjust how high the fly is off the ground, and so you could have it 10 inches off the ground if you want, or if it's raining sideways, you run it all the way down to the floor. And so just be mindful of like we see this on the backpack side. Like people will buy our gear, they'll buy this $800 backpack setup, and then not take the time to watch the instructional videos on how to properly use it. I think the same thing happens with tents, right? Like you buy a tent and you go, oh, I know how to set up a tent. But there's really like a lot of features that you can dial in, and one of those is certainly going to be they all have their own individual ways to adjust airflow, to keep moisture in or out, depending on the conditions outside, and just pay attention to that stuff. Go. Hopefully, the manufacturer does a good job of like, all right, here's how to set up our tent. Here's different ways to use it and how to use it, and they're all like as a grand scheme here. I mean, kind of like it almost ties back into the experience project, like of we try to say like all the what was that message we had about the details. Like I don't want people to get obsessed with the details, but if you want to kind of like take things to the next level, I guess you could say, like the details really, really matter. And
Hmm.
just knowing how to load your pack properly so that your 15-mile pack out isn't a big deal at all. And knowing how to use your shelter properly so you stay a little bit drier. Like all these little things kind of add up to all of a sudden you can very effectively, do hunts that 20 years ago I thought were impossible, and now we're doing them like it's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
And so just those, I guess, if you want to continue to like push your capabilities and really just be more comfortable out there, just start paying attention to these things and research and yeah. And I got obviously if you're listening to this podcast, I mean it's stuff we talk about, so you're already kind of doing it, but just kind of keep taking it further.
Jumping back to the one, that shelter in particular, I will say just a couple tips on that to be specific. There's head and foot vents in the floor. What happens is two things basically. One is you can stake out the floor, the bathtub floor itself. So you're not sticking out the shelter to set it up as you need to structurally, but you can stake out just the four corners of the inner bathtub floor. I know some people have overlooked that. I don't always do it, but if I am in an area where that ventilation, I really want to maximize it. That's something you can consider doing is staking out that floor. I when I carry the one shelter, I usually have a couple of these. I mean, they literally weigh grams. They're not structural tent stakes. They're these really, really tiny. I would never want to use them to hold up a tent type stakes, but they work perfect for just staking out the floor if you want to do that. And then additionally, those head and foot vents, just make sure that they're not blocked. And by that, I just mean with you or with gear. So if your sleeping pad slid towards either end, that could be blocking the vent. If you bring gear inside the tent with you, which I often do, I generally am going to keep it in my sides or at the corner of the tent, but not at the center head or center foot where it could block that vent. I've found that those vents actually are beneficial. Again, that's all an afterthought to everything like site selection and the big picture setup, but those are a couple things. Um,
But
and then just
when you're,
go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you are dealing with condensation, this isn't something I do regularly, but I've done it when I'm kind of anticipating conditions or a shelter that think I may be dealing with condensation, is just a little small kitchen sponge. Weighs, again, just grams, but you can basically wipe it down the inside of your shelter if you have areas that condensation or like that frost that kind of wants to build up and just kind of get that off the walls and then wring that thing out. That can be a way to deal with some of the condensation if it's building up. Again, not something I do all the time, but something I have done in certain conditions. What were you going to say, Steve?
It's that go. I remembered kind of that message from Experience Project, and it's like any one of these little details that we're talking about aren't going to make or break the hunt, but it's the sum of all these details and these decisions that kind of add up to being, oh my gosh, like this is certainly capable of doing now. This is much easier than I thought it would be.
Yeah, and just if you guys listen to the podcast all the time, you've probably heard us talk about this, but if you're newer and haven't heard it, when you're dealing with a tent that's either wet from rain, condensation, whatever, you're packing up in the morning and moving, which is what we're almost always doing, is get that tent, that shelter out later, midday, any opportunity you have, get it in the sun, lay it out, let some wind and warmth and light dry that shelter. So if you leave it in you put it away wet, you don't get out till the next night, you're just obviously going to be getting a wet shelter out. But it's actually pretty easy in many conditions on many hunts. You're sitting and eating lunch, taking a break, glassing for animals, get that shelter out and let it dry, and that makes a huge difference. Yeah, that's it, Steve. Let's wrap there for today. We got some good questions we'll get to on the next one. And as always, guys, more questions are welcome. So send an email to podcast@exomountaingear.com. Let us know what you want to hear. And then we got some great podcasts coming. So make sure you also hit subscribe or follow for those future episodes. We have another full length episode on Wednesday. Obviously, here as we're in the middle of September, a lot more hunting going on. So if you have a cool story or experience to share, maybe a question that comes from one of your hunts, definitely let us know. Best luck to all you guys getting after it and enjoy every moment.